first just show some of the migrants that are Illinois. We see these in Illinois, and from time to time, I don't know how consistently or persistently these are in Costa Rica. Well, I know they're not persistent there, but anyway, there are migrants through there. Are buntings and orioles, rose-breasted grosbeak, the ruby-throated hummingbird, a whole bunch of different warblers, vireos, tanagers, flycatchers. So this I just looked up at All About Birds, and so I just wanted to flag what we're talking about in this conversation. And I wanted to let people know. So this is the happy wren, and look, its Latin name even says Felix in it. Like Feliz Navidad sort of thing, for happiness, or yeah. So that's a cute little bird, and I met him at a bird banding station with Deborah Hamilton there, and Libby Hill, who I think is also on this call, and I'll mention. So this is just a cool little Costa Rican bird. It's also Mexico, Costa Rican bird. And I just thought it was one of the birds that our migrants meet down in Costa Rica. So that's why he's on there. So now to introduce Deborah. So Deborah, I first met Deborah Hamilton down in Costa Rica because Libby Hill from the Evanston North Shore Bird Club organized a trip down there, has known about Monteverde Institute and Deborah for a long time. And I got to tag along, and I just thought it was well, Deborah was fantastic, but the Institute is also fantastic. The amount of work that they're doing, the trees that they're planting is in the, huge numbers, not like our piddly numbers here in Evanston. So I just was so impressed and so glad that she's able to come to us and talk. Deborah is a research affiliate at the Monteverde Institute and president of the Costa Rica Conservation Foundation. She studies migratory and tropical bird conservation. She's been integral to tropical conservation since the 1990s. She studied the use of agricultural windbreaks and micro corridors for forest-dwelling birds, avian community changes in relation to climate change, and started an overwintering survival neotropical migratory bird station in Monteverde. She was a founding member of a Costa Rican foundation to protect and restore forest habitat in Costa Rica's Pacific slope to aid the recovery of the three-wattled bellbird, which we got to see when we were in Costa Rica. She shows up. This program is now jointly run with the Monteverde Institute, where Deb was the executive director for more than 8 years. Her publications include articles on vocalizations, habitat use, and frugivory patterns of bellbirds, as well as tropical forest restoration topics. So I'm going to stop sharing.
Hello, everyone. This is an absolute pleasure to be talking with you, our northern neighbors, in so many different ways. And as Leslie mentioned, it was an absolute pleasure to have Leslie and Libby down with us last year while we were working on one of the projects. And in that case, it was looking at areas that we had replanted ages between 4 years ago to 22 years ago, and looking at the recolonization of those forests by birds. And I'll talk a little bit about that first. I am just the spokesperson of an incredible team of people that have been working in getting forests restored here in Costa Rica for the last we started in 1998, so 27 years. So with that, I will start and say that up in Illinois, you have amazing birds, and we also do too. And we have unusual birds. This is a bare-necked umbrella bird. This is a blue-crowned motmot that are common. The umbrella bird is not common in the area. It's over on the Caribbean slope, very secretive. But the blue-crowned motmot is one that we see quite often. And as Leslie had mentioned, here are some of the examples of the birds that we share. And so these birds right now are down here in Costa Rica, and I have proof of that. This is one of the rose-breasted grosbeaks that we captured last October on one of the areas that we had restored in 2011. Just to give you some background on Monteverde, we're in Costa Rica. We're located up in the mountains. We are cloud forest. And in cloud forest, you have 60% of the precipitation coming in the form of clouds and mists. They're incredibly special forests. Only 1% of the forests in the world are cloud forest. And the way that they operate is they have growth forms in all different shapes and sizes, but mainly a lot of plants that grow on top of other plants. These are estimates. We keep using these numbers, but I want to be really clear that this is an estimated amount, but we are 0.04% of the land mass in the world, yet it is estimated we have 4% of the world's species of flora and fauna. Here in Monteverde, because of the unique location straddling the continental divide, where we have habitat on both Caribbean and Pacific slopes, we have about 50% of all the species that you find in Costa Rica. And that would mean we have 2% of all the world's species up here in this mountaintop. We have over 3,000 species of plants. And this, as you can see, this picture are of epiphytes. Epiphytes are plants that grow on the branches of other trees. They do it in a way so that they can be up in higher sunlight conditions and away from competition for not only sunlight on the forest floor, but nutrients. And so because 60% of that precipitation comes in the form of clouds and mists, they can get the nutrients and the water that they need. We have 878 species of them. One of the groups are orchids, and we have over 500 species of orchids here. It's one of the unique areas of the world where they believe speciation of orchids has occurred. For tree species, we have about 755. If you want to look at just one family, that would be the wild avocado family. We have 96. It says here over 90, but we have 96 different species of these avocados growing in these forests. And the sizes grow from a very small little berry type of an avocado to the mother of the cultivated avocados, which grows as a large forest tree with good-sized avocados on it. We're still discovering tree species here. There's been at least over 170 species discovered here in Monteverde. This is a picture of one of the species that we work with. It's called Mercienthes, and it doesn't have a species name. It's just black fruit. We have at least 121 species of different mammals in the zone. We have over 101 species of reptiles. We had about 46 different species of amphibians. In the late 80s, there was a big decline, and that's happened all over the planet. And our numbers reduced down to 26 species. And there's been a few species that would have been individuals that were able to hang on. So I think our official count is back up to about 35 different species of amphibians. Insects, who knows? Nobody knows on the planet, even in Illinois, in the tropics, in Monteverde, we have no clue how many species of insects we have. We know that we have 650 species of butterflies and moths, and that's about the total that you have in all of North America. For bird species up here, we have about 400 it varies, 433 to 452, depending on different counts and where you are. It's about half the species that we have in the whole country. And 83 of those species you find only on the Pacific slope. And so it may be confusing why I keep talking about this, but Central America is this very narrow strip of land between Nicaragua and Panama. We're deeply influenced by both the Caribbean and the Pacific Oceans. And there's a mountain range running right through the center. The weather here moves from the east to the west, so it's the opposite of North America. And the Caribbean slope tends to be incredibly wet, up to 21 feet of precipitation a year. The Pacific side is considered the dry side. Dry meaning we get 2 to 3 meters of precipitation a year. So basically between 6 to 9 feet of precipitation a year. But there's real distinctions in the flora and fauna. And so for that reason, I'll keep mentioning the Pacific slope. About a quarter of the birds that we have are your birds, or our birds, I guess I would say. And this is a picture of a cedar waxwing, which some years makes it down here and other years it doesn't make it here. We also have 4 species that come up from South America. The unusual part of that is while the North American migrants come down here to overwinter, and they breed back up in North America, the South American migrants come here to overwinter as well, but they breed here. So there's a real interesting mechanism going on there that we don't know a whole lot about. Okay. I want to mention that Costa Rica is one of the happiest countries in the world. It is in stiff competition with Denmark, but it's a good-natured competition, I would say. Otherwise, people wouldn't be happy. But there's lots of reasons for it. It's a very progressive country, and it's also a very conservation-minded country. So going back to these forests of Costa Rica, there has been an issue, and it's mainly happened on the Pacific slope. And this is a picture looking up towards Monteverde, where the clouds are. But there has been a decent amount of, and I shouldn't say decent, I guess, there's been quite a bit of deforestation that happened in the country up until the 1990s. And so while Costa Rica has an amazing reputation for conservation, and they deserve every word of it, they did have the highest deforestation rate in Central America in the 1970s and 1980s. The government recognized this. They called together scientists. They asked for what areas of the country should be protected, what were the biodiversity hotspots, and we all remember kind of when that was really in the mainstream. And scientists were able to pinpoint different areas. The government listened to the scientists and started a whole series of protecting and creating national parks, put in 1996 a forestry law so that you can't cut trees on your own property. You can do it if it's threatening your house or something like that, but you have to get permission to do so. And then they put in a strong biodiversity law saying that all biodiversity is protected. And they also amended their constitution to say that every person has a right to a clean and healthy environment. So the picture started looking back like this. I'm sorry if this is fuzzy, but basically we start to see where the recuperation has happened. But we still have issues that we have to deal with. And we have catastrophic climate events. Everyone knows about Helene that wreaked havoc when it got up to Florida and North Carolina. And I'm one of those nerds always watching the satellite pictures. It formed over Central America, and it formed in the Gulf, and it formed over the different countries here. And it was massive. And I remember talking to my husband, who was up in the States, saying, this thing is huge. And it sure was. It stayed huge all the way going up into the Gulf of Mexico and then into Florida, and then going as far as North Carolina. So we are facing stronger storms. And with changes in temperature, as well as just changes in general, we're seeing more pests and we're seeing more plant diseases. And so we're facing new challenges. Another thing that I mentioned, and it was in my Leslie's commentaries of the work that I've done, one of the things that we started to look at were what were the changes going on in the bird communities over time. We were fortunate to collaborate with George Powell, who did his PhD research here in the 1970s and did a whole series of mist netting where there are maps and times and captures. And in 1998, he asked me to repeat that study. And so we repeated it in 1998 and in 1999. And then we repeated it again in 2016 to learn in the same habitat, which you can see a picture of. The place is called the Bullpen. It's in 1974, 1992, in 2015. You can see that the basic habitat has stayed pretty much intact. And then starting to look at the differences in captures. So we repeated the exact mist netting protocol and amount of time that was done in the 1970s. And you can see that our capture rates of individuals decreased and the number of species that we captured over that time decreased from 63 species down to 47 species. One of the species, however, that appeared that did not appear in the 1970s, and we don't really know why, were Catharus ustellatus, the Swainson's thrush. And so, and most of the individuals that we had here are ones that migrate out to the western area and go up into Canada. But we don't know what caused that change, but they tend to come through here on their way down to South America, and then they come back in the months of March and April and feed quite heavily, especially on Lauraceae, or those wild avocado fruits. And as you know, many of the neotropical migrants, while they're insectivorous up in North America, they either combine their diet with fruit here, or some of them are all fruit frugivores. And then you have birds such as Tennessee warbler, which changes and even eats nectar. Our basic finding in the end of that was that the birds that rely solely on insects, they're in trouble. And unfortunately, we do not have parallel studies on insects to really identify what's going on there. But we do know that insects are disappearing in the world. Okay, so here's the star of our show. I'm going to see if this plays for you. It looks like it does. This is basically, well, first, he's my boss. He's my real boss. And I should say he's our boss. He's driving the whole team. And this is the three-wattled bellbird, Procnius tricurunculatus. Both the names, that's his call. Both names refer to the three wattles that he has, one on each side of his bill, one from the center. As you know, birds have amazing adaptation for flights. Most of those adaptations are to make them lighter. And so this guy has extra appendages. He's carrying around extra weight. And obviously then there's a benefit for those that outweigh the weight, the extra weight that he's carrying. This is the Monteverde dialect, and you heard that feedback whistle. Only the Monteverde dialect has this whistle. We worked with Don Kreutzma, who you may have heard. He's famous for bird vocalization studies and has written different books and articles on it. And basically sub-Aucenes, which this group of cotingas, they are New World species. You don't find them in the Old World. They are closely related to manakins and also tyrant flycatchers. They are sub-Aucenes, and according to all previous studies, sub-Aucenes couldn't learn dialects. However, we have recordings of at least 3 different dialects. There's possibly a 4th dialect in the region. And here in Monteverde, we have this Monteverde dialect, and then we have another one that's called the Talamancan dialect, and then a small percentage of our birds are actually bilingual. He is a Central American endemic, this species. He is listed on the IUCN Red List as vulnerable, and we are concerned for him. But he basically has led us through this whole project that I'm about to tell you about. This is the female. She's sexually dimorphic. Bellbirds, male bellbirds are promiscuous, and females will do the sexual selection, and then she is alone to build the nest, lay the one egg, and incubate it and feed the fledgling. So bellbirds will spend 10 hours a day calling from high perches, and also another perch that I'm about to describe to you. They call 3 to 4 times a minute while they are here. Lots of energy expenditure in this. And as I mentioned, these males are promiscuous. So the bright white head, a call that carries for at least 1 kilometer in distance when it's above the forest canopy. They're trying to get females to come to them. And when they do, one of the uses of those wattles is they can control the blood supply. They extend it, and then they kind of show them off. And we have one that basically showed off so much he tied a knot in the central wattle, which could make him the super bellbird or the not so special bellbird. We don't know. And then if he has everything, I should go back here. He has everything that a bellbird should have, and she copulates with him, then he will copulate with as many as he possibly can get. The other use of the wattles is defending their territories. And as we know, posturing is an energy efficient behavior to ward off basically trouble. And we do it as humans to make ourselves look bigger or smaller if we're threatened. Your dog does it by putting his ears back and showing his teeth and raising his hackles. And it's an easy way of trying to avoid a fight without spending a bunch of energy. Bellbirds will hold these calling perches, and normally you would see this perch covered over with a tree above it. This one happens to be exposed. They're short branches that are 1 meter long in length. They're dead branches. Again, under the canopy, they're about 20 meters off the forest floor. And he will spend many hours calling from that specific perch. If an intruder comes in, which could be, in this case, this is a young male bellbird. It takes them 7 years to get their adult male plumage. About 3 years, they look like females. If a male comes in to challenge him on his perch, what will happen is if the bellbird will make sure that the bird gets basically gently pushed to the very end of the branch, and then the territory owner will take in a big chug of air, lean over to get as close to the auricular opening of the intruder bellbird, and bonk. And he, remember, has this bonk that carries for a kilometer in distance, so it's quite jarring. The intruder will sort of fall off the end of the branch, go to another tree, sit and recuperate. Persistence pays off even in nature. If he's persistent enough, he could come back enough times, do this routine. And if the territory owner then gets tired, he takes over the perch, and then he takes over the territory. Bellbirds only eat fruit, and the bulk of their diet are the Laraceae, or the wild avocados, and they eat them by swallowing them whole. It goes into their crop with enzymes that dissolves the flesh. About 18 minutes later, they regurgitate the seed, and that therefore they can take advantage of a food resource that's normally too big for them. When we started, program started in 1993 by George Powell and Carlos Guindon and Robin Bork. I was hired in 1995. Victorino was hired in 1997. And basically, we've been with this project since then. In 97, we were given funds to travel throughout Costa Rica and Western Panama to assess what was happening with the bird as a species. And it was in decline everywhere we went. We believe there's only 4 populations left. And it was pretty obvious what was going on. For half of the year, they used Pacific slope habitat. And you can see by these maps, that was incredibly limited. So we basically came back and formed the Costa Rican Conservation Foundation. And the very first thing that we were doing was trying to protect pieces of existing forest that were in the area. And you can see off in the distance how fragmented this forest was. So we protected different areas around in our region. And then parallel to this, we started really what's been our most successful piece of work, which has been tropical forest restoration. The man in the lower right is my hero. His name is Lorenzo Vargas. He has worked in the project since the very beginning. He is pretty much a fanatic on raising trees. He has figured out how to collect seeds of native species from the forest, which means he knows the phenology of these trees so well. He knows when to collect different species. He collects them, and he has figured out how to germinate over 140 different species of native trees. And those species are comprised of 43 different families. We have given away over 300,000 trees to private landowners. And if we don't produce at least 16,000 trees a year, we don't have enough for the local demand. And people are wanting to reforest for multiple reasons. It's a real blessing that there is a high willingness to reforest. We don't have to convince anybody. All we do is put out announcements that we have trees, they're free, and as long as you can come pick them up. If somebody can't pick them up, we will work to get the trees to them. And if somebody can't plant them, we will look to get student groups. And that's where the Monteverdi Institute is really important, because they have a nice group of students that keep coming different years from different universities, and they get put to work. One of our focal points also is to protect endangered tree species. I heard you mention oaks. This is an oak that we have here. It's critically endangered, Quercus insignis. And you can see the size of that acorn basically fits in the palm of my hand. Ocotea monteverdensis is another tree. Both of these are critically endangered on the IUCN Red List. And we've worked with, it says 200 members here, but I actually just did the count, and we were at 494 different members of the community we have worked with over these past years. And they are super important in getting the trees in the ground. It's not easy. Sometimes the soil is baked hard, especially as you get down into the lower elevations. There are slopes, there's different weather environments, there's bugs out there, but they all get put in. And again, much of it is with volunteer help and with student help. Getting the trees to the sites also is a challenge at sometimes. But we really believe that these small impacts or these small projects have huge impacts. And while people are really talking about scaling up restoration, we're still talking about we really need to make sure that it's accessible to the small landowner, that they can get a diversity of tree species, they can get any support that they need from us. And that includes, as I mentioned, getting the trees to them, helping with planting. We do parallel research to look at survivorship and growth rates, carbon sequestration. We're looking at forest integrity. We're planting trees, but are we really planting forests with functional integrities and all the ecosystem services as their natural counterparts? Looking at like, when do lichens come in? When do mosses come in? When do epiphytes and vines and lianas? And when do they start reproducing? And it's really outstanding because these trees, even though they are hardwoods, they grow really fast and they mature very quickly. And so it's hopeful. And we need hope right now. And this is a pasture we purchased in 2006. This was the only tree on it. Here's what it looks like in 11 years later. That is the same tree in the middle of the picture in the background. That is the same tree. And so these forests come back quickly. This is another habitat or a piece of farm actually that was purchased in 2002 by a partner in the foundation. And now you can see how it's come back. The other thing is we are a co-founder with 5 other organizations, including the Monteverde Institute, of the Bellbird Biological Corridor. It's a concept basically that was put under a legal decree by the Costa Rican government. So while they didn't have funds to continue to protect more national parks or protected zones or wildlife refuges, they created the biological corridor legal or the decreto, or the decree. And this allows grassroots organizations to be able to take the lead and create biological corridors. And within the corridor that we are, there are at least 133 species of neotropical migrants, 17 of which are of concern. One of the studies that we're doing currently, and this is what Libby and Leslie took part in when they were down here, was looking at the newly planted forest, the forest that we have restored, and the older forests, and comparing the birds that we're finding in the 2 areas to really determine at what ages are these forests serving our resident birds and our neotropical migrant birds. And it's pretty amazing. We have 111 bird species using the restored forests, the oldest of which is 22 years old. In restoration plots that are less than 6 years old, we've found 32 different species of birds. By 17 years, we have 106 species, which is 86% of the registered birds that you would find in a secondary forest in that zone. And this one, I have to send this to U.S. Fish and Wildlife because we did receive grants from U.S. Fish and Wildlife to protect habitat for neotropical migratory birds. And basically, you can see in these different forests of different ages, and I'm sorry that doesn't appear. Actually, I'm so sorry. The first column is restored forest, the second column is older forest, and the third column is the total number of birds. So you can see in the restored forest, we captured 153 individuals, 19 species, and those were neotropical migratory birds. And we caught 117 of the local birds. And then 80 individuals and 7 species in the older forest, and a total of 233 species and 21 species of neotropical migratory birds. And I'm sorry, I don't have the species count for the resident birds. And these are just a few of the pictures that the golden wing warbler, the Kentucky warbler, and then these are yellow-green vireos. So these are actually South American migrants. Actually, we have 2 different species here. Interesting. My slide was labeled incorrectly because we have a red-eyed there. And then we have species that are resident species. And so two of the spectacular captures that we had, one is a lineated woodpecker, large bird, and we were thrilled because we captured him in a restored forest. The other is one that's much more kind of omnivorous and moves around in open and closed habitats, but it was the emerald toucanet, and this is our colleague, Victorino Molina. So all of this takes place because of a dedicated team of people that have been working together, assisting in one way or another, and it's made this possible. None of this is possible without the landowners. Their collaboration, their willingness, their enthusiasm is really so important. And also groups, student groups that come in and help plant, and then other groups such as yourselves. There's a donation that's made for the talks that we give or different activities, and all of that makes us all partners in this program. We know in Monteverde, even though there's tons of conservation here, we know that extinction is possible. We lost the golden toad. It hasn't been seen since 1989. We're working to make sure that it doesn't happen for the three-wattled bellbird, as well as a whole host of other plants and species. And so we thank you for being a part of that with us. This is our website if you want any more information. And this is the team standing in front of some trees that were planted years ago. And so I thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your doing this and presenting to us. That's a lot of information. So can I just ask, keep people a little bit longer? And if anyone has questions, please send it in the chat, or you probably can unmute yourself if you want to just ask directly to Deborah. But I was wondering, can you just say, so what is the total area that you directly are restoring and then also restoring through the farmers or partners?
We believe at this point we've restored about 200 hectares, and a hectare is 2.5 acres. What we do is we basically say, okay, we're gonna only count a 50% survival rate, and then per hectare we usually use about 700 trees per hectare. So that's how we come up with that amount.
Right, right. And the other thing we experienced in Costa Rica was that farmers also have some incentives, financial incentives to maintain restored property, right? I mean, they allow, you pay a small fee to be able to go onto their property to see bats or birds or whatever. I just thought maybe you could say a little bit about that.
So there's a mixture. And the first thing that I always start out with is there is in this culture a real appreciation for forests. And I think part of it is you think of, we think back to people living in the 1800s, they were living off of the forest and with the forests. And so there's a deep, deep connection. And we see that with the older generation who basically grew up cooking with wood and, harvesting wood from the fragments that they kept. So there's an incredible appreciation for forests just from the beginning. Ecotourism has different positive impacts. One is all these little kids up here for the last 30 years have seen people come from all over the world to see the forests. And so that is a silent message that says these forests are super special. So there's a definite value that's placed just for the sake of being a forest. Local farmers, there's multiple reasons why they're so willing to reforest. One is they may try to forest or augment the fragments that they already have to attract ecotourism to come in, and thereby they can earn income from that. They may now have changed their profession from dairy farming, which is an incredibly hard, I think rewarding but hard life, getting up at 4 a.m. for a cow that never takes a vacation. And they may now be working in the ecotourism sector. And so they no longer need those pastures. And then the third is gas here is expensive. And it's because there is an environmental tax on that. And that is converted into payment for environmental services. So people can actually get a small payment per year per hectare. I believe now it's about $70 a hectare if you have forest that's regrowing or forest that's standing.
Right. Okay. Okay. And then Libby also mentioned, Libby Hill, who is with me, she's on here. She also mentioned that she seemed to remember that clouds are declining. Um, I can't move
Yeah.
around in the chat very easily for some reason, but yeah.
Yes. So they're actually, because the temperatures are higher, the clouds are higher up in the atmosphere. So they're not hitting the top of the mountains. And what would happen is when they would go over the trees and the land, basically they would get a cooling effect and the water condenses and forms those clouds. And that's where a lot of this rain is captured from. And that's not happening. So people are really worried, especially about epiphytes, because they need that, be bathed in that water. And so that is happening. That is one of the effects, that we're losing cloud forest.
Right, right, right. Well, I mean, does anyone else have questions for Deborah?
I do. I don't know if I'm unmuted.
Yeah.
I think I
Yes, you're
am.
unmuted.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Melissa, and my friend Maria and I just got back from Costa Rica. And on our last day, yeah, we met, well, we'd already met her at Corcovado, but she was one of the original journalists to call out certain illegal wildlife practices. Um, anyway, we visited her at her home. She's got this incredible garden in back. It consists of both vegetables and then goes way deep back. It's got a ton of a variety of Costa Rican plant trees, including like a 250-year-old ficus. Um,
Wow.
she is listed in a biological corridor, that thing that you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the deal. Her neighbor, and she's kind of out, she's in Belen. Her neighbor has bought up all the land that forms an L shape, a big L shape around her.
Mm.
And it's just pasture now and open. But his plan is to put condominiums for 1,000
Okay.
people. And
Wow.
yeah, yes, with a big drive that goes around it. And it's heartbreak. I mean, she and her neighbors, appealed to the zoning commission or whatever the equivalent is there in San Jose or Belen or San Jose, and got nowhere. And what she was saying is that even though she's listed as a in the biological having land worthy of the biological corridor, there's no teeth in that, and so she has no recourse based on that
Right.
list. Is there
Yeah.
anything can do?
So you're absolutely right. The biological corridor is I'm amazed by it because it has done all these grassroots efforts, but there is no teeth in it. And enforcement of a lot of these laws, while the laws are really good, the enforcement is also hard because there's such a small amount of money that the government has to put into having functionaries, employees that actually work in these different government agencies. And then there is influence. There's definitely influence. My gut says that was a developer and they paid somebody some money to get permits to do that. So it is not utopia by any stretch of the imagination. And there are logging operations. The Osa Peninsula is unfortunately one of the areas that gets hit because it's got a lot of older growth forest. The northern zone is the other area that suffers from that.
So she has, I can't give her any advice based on your experience. I mean, you're just saying
I think she just has to keep, call CNOC, keep complaining, keep the squeaky, keep that going.
What's it called? CNAC?
CNOC, yeah, SINAC. Talk to some, is she in Belén by San Jose or is she down in the Osa?
By San Jose.
Okay, by San Jose. Yeah, oof, that's going to be hard. Talk to different, just keep being the squeaky wheel.
We
Okay.
also, we also got a question. Thank you, Melissa, for asking about this. Are you okay with
Yeah.
that?
Yes.
Yeah. We also got asked about, U.S. Fish and Wildlife grants, and how is Monteverde doing with the cutoff of different grant funding? I know you said personally you're worried about your uh, PhD advisor as well, but yeah.
Yeah, no,
About
it's um to speak freely, it's going to be a tough time for conservation. It's going to be a really tough time. It's good. There's going to be a whole trickle down effect. One, we're losing a lot of expertise that's really needed. We're also going to be losing a lot of kind of scientific research. Hold on one second. If you want to put the light on, Bill, you can. um, and there's so many different ways this is going to be affected. I'm personally worried about the nonprofit status of money leaving the country. We receive our donations through Amigos of Costa Rica. And I know before we couldn't get, in the last administration of the current president, we couldn't get fish and wildlife numbered bans anymore because nothing was supposed to be given to another country. And so it really hampered that collaborative study that's been going on for years and years and years. It's worrisome. Grants, NSF, what's going to happen with NSF?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I think we're all recognizing that it's going to be a tough time.
Right. Right. We also had somebody mentioning the plastic management in Costa Rica, where she was at a resort near Corcovado, who had just hired a full-time sustainability manager for the resort. There was no single-use plastic throughout the entire place. All food waste was composted or used for local pigs. The national park allows no plastic in the park, and they check every backpack. Check out any resort approved by Beyond Green. It feels great when you know your travel dollars support resorts that are doing the right thing. So I just wanted to call that out
Nice.
to people.
Nice. It's true. It's true. There's no single use, and it's customary. It's everybody. It's like just it's how it is. Everybody composts their waste, and I shouldn't say everybody because there are exceptions, but the waste gets composted, and then there's a whole recycling program.
Right, right. Well, thank you so much for your time here and for talking with us all. We really, really appreciate it, and so impressive, the incredible work you're doing, the amount of restoration that you're engaged in. It's just so inspiring at a time when, it sucks right now. So thank you so much. Uh,
No, my pleasure. My pleasure. I hope everyone finds green spaces. Leslie, keep on, and all your colleagues, and Libby, keep doing what you're doing too, because that's also so impressive and so important.
well, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay.
Okay, thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.